Okay, so this is kind of open-ended. What have you done to get in touch with community members? And by community members, I mean anybody who isn't a straight out academic. So Ellison, I'm gonna let you maybe go first. Milena, you can go second. Paul, I know you have done a lot of that in different ways. And then and Misa, I know that you have worked for a health outreach organization, and anyone else who also has ideas, feel free to pile in at the end. I'm gonna let Ellison go first because she's gonna be moving, and Milena because she's a guest. And then I just generally want to hear from everybody. And Milena, I hope it's useful for you too.
Oh, so should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I'll preface by saying, Will, I know you can, I think, be on the call for the whole time. So if you notice things while I'm talking that you think you could add later, Tammy and I had already said that you might have something to add towards the end of the conversation or just later. And thanks, Tammy, for the heads up. I'm trying to be succinct. The type of engagement that I've done has been, I think, had three different types of goals. One has been households, one has been people, and the other has been workplaces. And I distinguish between households and people because sometimes for some studies, it's been more important that we are assessing a home. And for other studies, especially those that are more health-based, it's been more important that we are getting the right people. I think, again, trying to think about this, Tammy, in advance, one theme through all the community engagement that I've been involved in is not pretending, thinking ahead that we wanted a really broad swath of people, when in reality, when faced with low numbers, we really do have specific goals. It's hard to sometimes make those surface for ourselves to recognize we do have goals. So I'll give an example. In the workplace focus study, there's this broad goal to serve rural and underserved workplaces. That was a stipulation of the money that we were getting. And we thought, well, we'll sort of just be broad about that. And we spent about 6 months just broadly sending things out where we thought it would go. It wasn't until we got precise about what our criteria were. We developed a whole framework that had an acronym with 5 letters that represented 5 dimensions that were important, and it had different weights. And then I think we got a lot better at recruiting because we knew what we were looking for. I don't think all studies are built that way, but ours really was. And once we knew what we were looking for, then we found it. That's one theme. I think another has been.
Can you say a little bit about,
Yeah.
sorry,
Oh, that's okay.
what you were looking for and then how it became successful when you called it out explicitly, and then maybe why it didn't work before? And for everybody, I also want to hear what hasn't worked for you and why you think it didn't work.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant because I'm sure there's like a counterexample for everyone that I would give. Rural and underserved is not very well defined in terms of who you would reach out to for a workplace. So we were broadly advertising that we were offering indoor air quality and ventilation assessments for rural and underserved workplaces. And I think, why do I think it didn't work? I think it's because most of the time, okay, this is just a personal belief that I don't know that it's founded in literature. Is I don't think people see themselves through the lens of one identity. And that's what we were searching for. It's like, I'm not sure that workplaces that are in rural parts of Colorado like view themselves as like a rural workplace. They're just a workplace. They happen to be, that's not always true, but I think some of it is that the identity we applied was more of an identity than it was like the criterion. So when we got more precise, like we want workplaces that are under a certain number of people working there. We want workplaces that are in census areas that fit a definition of social vulnerability. Whether or not the workplace cares about that was less important. And it was more that we got down to a list of like individual places that we could send out a message to and say, hey, we think you might be interested in this. Are you? And then it wasn't a broad, like, do you think you fit into our bin? In which case they often didn't maybe even pay attention to it. Instead, it was like, we think you might be interested in this. Are you? Does that answer your question a little? Then I think that related to that is we weren't actually doing that asking. I think that helped. The people doing the asking for studies when we've been most successful are the people who have the most to offer the people that participate. So in the case of the workplaces, CDPHE had the money to give to workplaces to do work on their building. And they were the one asking, hey, we think you might be interested in this study. Are you? And they also were the people that had the money to hand out if there was an intervention to be done. In Fort Collins, it was the same thing. If we were doing the asking, it was a lot, it wasn't zero success rate, but it was very low until home assessors who were already doing inspections said, hey, we've worked with CSU and they do this nice healthy home study and we think you'd be interested. Would you? And that's when we really, I think we got 30 out of the 40 homes into our study because of one company in Fort Collins that just believed in what we were doing and sold it for us. And then similarly in a study that is trying to measure home air quality, the best selling of that has been through people that are health, they're lung clinicians, and they're with patients and say, I think it might be helpful to have some indoor air quality measurements to understand what's at your home. And that nudges them over into the yes category. And I'm just talking about participation in a study. I think if you're talking about intervention uptake, that's an interesting twist, is that like next to nobody asked for money from CDPHE after they got an assessment, because I think there's a lot of other resistances to go through there.
That might be interesting to explore later. So maybe one thing at a time, though, that is really interesting. And I hadn't seen that.
But it's not really like, I think what you've been asking about is like getting participation.
I think it's kind of all, it's all of it, because we also have intervention. So I'm not sure where to draw the line.
Yeah. One last thing I'll put out there, because there's a lot of really interesting people in this group that might have different opinions. I have formed a belief that unless I am doing a clinical trial, like I only want to try and recruit people that are already interested in the thing that we're trying to learn about. And that's like a super, super, super small percent of the world. It's not zero. So trying to find those people, maybe it's, the finding them is still has some tortuous path to it, but I don't for the purposes of the work that I do, there's not a lot more for me to learn from recruiting people that don't want to put home environmental quality in their top 20 issues. And I don't fault them at all for that. There's a lot of chafing on both sides, unnecessarily so. And I think right now, I think my belief comes from that. I think it degrades people's faith that academics are doing useful things. So I don't want to engage with households that are like, could take it or leave it, and really push for them to be a part of my studies. Because I don't think what I'm trying to learn benefits a lot more from like informative nulls on that point. Like people that don't put indoor air quality in their top 20, we could learn more about that in separate type of work, but the type of work that I do doesn't gain a lot of insight from learning about why they don't want to be in my study. So what it's meant is that I've relaxed I've been more willing to risk, showing an enrollment profile of who's in my study and it not really quite meeting the goals we might have set out in terms of like representation. Because anyway, it comes from a belief that there's not a lot of good value, and I'd rather work with households or workplaces that have at least marginal interest or maybe like high interest.
That's a really nice perspective. Thank you, Allison.
Okay, I tried to summarize or stop. I know there's a lot of people on this call who have a lot to offer, so happy to turn it
But
over.
you're one of them, so thank you. Melina, you wanna
Yeah.
go next?
I would love to. Thank you, Elson. That was, yeah, there were definitely some things that I could relate to in my role. I don't know how much time I have to share, but I do want to give you all a quick introduction about who I am and what I do, if there's time for that. I think that's relevant to the work that I do. So really quickly, I'm originally from California. I've lived in three other countries before coming back to the United States. And then at this point, I've lived in Colorado for 13 years. My background is in public health. I did my concentration in epidemiology at the Colorado School of Public Health, so I have an MPH. My current role is as a project and outreach coordinator at the Department of Atmospheric Science in Emily Fisher's lab, for those of you who know Emily Fisher. I work on 3 grant-funded projects, one of which is co-designing a communication campaign for wildfire events in Boulder County. The second one is improving air toxics monitoring and education in Larimer and Weld counties. So that's around oil and gas emissions. And then the third one is DIFRA. It's a mentorship program for women in STEM. So those are the 3 things that I work on, 2 of them having to do with outdoor air quality. My previous work, I am passionate about a lot of different topics in public health. I've worked in food safety, infectious disease, behavioral health, mental health, and now air quality. So I have a lot of experience in various topics that I can pull from that have helped me learn while, as I transition from job to job. I will say the one thing that is most important to me is proximity to community. That's what I've learned. I've worked at the federal level, the state level, and I worked at a nonprofit. And now with CSU, I'm really able to work closely with community. I really strive to choose roles that allow me to work interdisciplinary with SMEs and allow me to raise the voices of those who are silent and silenced. And it's especially important for me personally to work with Spanish-speaking populations. So that is my background. I do want to share a high level of things that have worked for me personally. I have a lot to say about this, and I'm happy to add more specifics, but for now, I'll just stick to high level. What has worked for us is finding well-established groups through trusted and invested partners. So for our smoke project, our wildfire smoke project that's happening in Boulder, I was actually brought on because the project had already started when I was brought on, and they realized they're working with community members living in manufactured home communities there are a lot of Spanish speakers in that community, and no one on my team spoke Spanish. And they were having a really challenging time interacting and really creating those trusted relationships. So they decided to hire someone who was bilingual, who had community experience. So I came on and we partner with Boulder County and the city of Boulder. And through my connections with them, I found different groups of people, of community leaders, to talk to about wildfire smoke, their perceptions and attitudes. And we started out with interviews with community leaders and then went down to community members. And it was all through different community groups. So you start with a city or county person who is, really involved in whatever environmental health groups that there are, because there are a lot of them, community groups, right, trying to improve their communities. And you go from them to learning about these groups. And then I was asking these people specifically if they were interested in our project. It's much harder to convince people to come to you, so it's better to go to them. And you've probably heard people say, meet the community where they are. And that's one of the ways to do that, is to just go and be a part of something that's already been well established. It's on top of that, more importantly, in my opinion, is to spend the time investing in creating those relationships versus solely having a transactional relationship. It does take a lot of time, but it's really valuable and really important. Community members can be distrustful of organizations and institutions, and for good reason. Disproportionately impacted communities are used to being used for research and then abandoned and forgotten. So it's important for me, especially, to let them know that I'm there to listen and learn, and I want to get to know them. That part is really important to me. It means a lot to me. And if I can't have that, then it feels like my work is not fulfilling and I'm not doing it right. So when I think about creating those trusted relationships, it looks like attending community events to learn about the population versus having that be an opportunity for us to solely meet our objectives. It's ideal if we can do both, but my priority is always first just getting to know people. Of course, also listening and asking questions. I have seen in my experience, a lot of researchers assume that they know what community needs, and it doesn't make any sense because they're not a part of that community. So they shouldn't be making any assumptions. And just because one similar community has expressed certain needs does not mean that any sort of parallel community is concerned about the same things. So it's really important to just listen. The other thing that I have found extremely important is staying in communication and keeping your word. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If I tell them that I'm going to get back to them by this day, I'm going to get back to them by that day. If I don't have the answer what they're looking for, I will still get back to them by that day and say, I'm still working on this, and give them another time that I'm going to get back to them. That connection is so important. We have so much going on, and it's really easy to just be like, oh, I'll let them know once I figure it out. But I have found in my experience, it's important to really stick to what you're saying. And then also something that Ellison was saying that I could really relate to is, as researchers, we do have specific objectives. And as Ellison was saying, they're not putting themselves in one category, right? This is their entire life experience and what they're going through on a daily basis. So it's important to listen and then do what you can to connect them to other resources and other people, right? So these people are living these experiences, and it's tied to so many other things versus just like our one research question. The other thing I wanted to add was, when it comes to planning our own events, I like to ask them what day or time or place is best for them to meet. I try not to make assumptions about what I think would be the ideal place for them to meet. I just ask them. I just ask them where they're comfortable, places they've been before, things like that. So that's high level-ish. like I say, I have a lot to say about this. There are a couple of things that I do want to emphasize as non-negotiables. And the first one is compensation, right? To compensate our community members in Boulder, I spoke to our contact with the city and the county, asked them what they were compensating community members for similar work, and then we found the funds to pay them on the higher end of that. So just asking around. The other thing that I find is a non-negotiable is providing childcare and transportation assistance. Those things are huge barriers that if you provide some support, it allows for a lot more participation. And I offer it every single time, even if I know these people don't usually have small children with them, or if I know they have a car. Anytime I have an event, I will tell them, do you need childcare? Do you need transportation assistance? Because you never know when the situation could change. The other thing is if it's an evening meeting, we need to provide dinner. That is also non-negotiable. People are giving up their evening times, which they spend with their families or making food for their families. That providing dinner is the least that we can do. And the other thing, a couple more things. When we run bilingual events, I have to make sure everything is in both languages, and I mean everything. There are forms, RSVP forms, whatever it is, and every button has to be in English and Spanish. And it's really hard to remember those details, but it's really important because if you have a flyer in English that says RSVP here and you click on it, flyer in Spanish and it says RSVP here, click on it and it takes you to an English form. To me, that's just a form of breaking that trust that you worked so hard to build. And it takes a lot of work and it's a lot of details. And if you don't speak multiple languages, it's something that is easily forgotten. So that is really important also. Obviously, hire interpreters, which I have a lot to say about that too. So if anybody wants to know more about that, let me know. And something that I've been doing recently, we have a committee and we have a couple monolingual Spanish speakers and the rest are English speakers. And the Spanish speaking community members are actually part of the Healthy Homes program. So they're very used to the headsets and having interpreters there. And I kind of had this moment where I was just like, why don't we just turn the tables here? Like they're always the people listening to the headsets and they're not always getting every single detail because it is really different. So what I've been doing is when it's my turn to facilitate any part of those committee meetings, I do my pieces in Spanish and all of the English speakers listen to their headsets. That way people can see what it's like for something to be happening that in a language that is not your primary language. And it's okay to do that. I think sometimes we don't think about that, but I find it's important for other people to see what it's like to be on the other side of those things. The last thing I'm going to say is weekends are for friends and family. Don't assume that we can take up their weekends. You can offer evenings and weekends and see what they prefer, but it's important to ask and remember how we are all spending our weekends. So that's kind of the high level of things that I have to say. And like I said, I have so much more, but I'll stop there.
Wow, thank you. Yes. Gosh, I would love to hear everything you have to say. I want to give other people a chance to speak. So maybe I'll go through other people, but just thank you for summarizing it so clearly. Those are all things that I have heard before, and yet I think you packaged them all up into a really compelling package. So thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thanks
that.
for allowing me to share.
No, that it's a gift to us. So there's no allowance about it. I feel very grateful that you're willing to share your experience. Let me see. Paul, I don't know if you want to talk about your experience. I called on Misa, Danny, I know you've done work with what you call EJ communities. Marilee, you've certainly done surveys. And Naomi, I know that you've done work also in the Navajo Nation, and I think you said you've had maybe a hanging back role as part of the respect. But I would like to hear from you all about best practices for getting people engaged and yeah, and how to keep interacting with them. I think, Milena, even though I could talk to you for the rest of the hour, and we're not going to have that opportunity right now, you brought out something that I would like to know more about. So maybe people um could be mentioning this, and that's the importance of the long-term relationship. I am interested in knowing how to keep showing up, even if I don't need anything or don't think I have anything to offer. And I think because I don't have an in, sometimes I don't know what to do. Maybe I should just go. But I would like to hear more about what do we need to do to be good community members and to be in relationship with people independent of the research engagement. So I am willing to do that. I'm not sure where I would find the time, but I think it's so important to develop that I would love to know where to start. And so if you maybe I should let you answer that, Milena, and then as other people speak, they can comment on that too.
Yeah, happy to. I think the thing I would really actually want to emphasize is that if we're wanting to work with community, I think you need to set aside a separate position for someone like me, someone in my role. Um, it's somebody who, speaks the language of the people that you're wanting to interact with, and also a person whose sole responsibility, I mean, I do have other responsibilities, but sole responsibility is to interact with these community members, because then I can sit and really be intentional and meaningful about the interactions I'm having. So I work with Emily. Emily has so many different projects and she loves to show up for community events. But
Mhm,
if she shows up versus me showing up, it's
mhm,
different. It's just
mhm.
really different.
Okay.
So, um, and that's another reason why I was brought onto this project, because they need somebody who speaks their language and looks like them and has had similar experiences. I don't claim to have the same experiences, which is why I strive to raise voices that have been quieted. But I do what I can with the privilege that I have. And I think it's important to have that person, because otherwise, your intention may be to want to show up. But if you don't have the time, for good reason, Tammy, um,
Mhm.
it's just not going to come off as meaningful or impactful as you want.
Mm. Okay, thanks. Okay, who wants to speak? Feels like they have something to say.
Hey Tammy, I have
Hey,
I have something to kind of mention, and it's interesting because when I was at the CHA conference, the Colorado Environmental Health Association conference, I don't know, about maybe a couple months ago, someone spoke, like there was a presenter who spoke about this thing specifically, this topic specifically, and it was kind of along the lines of being present in the communities in which you want to engage with. So I think it's part of like we don't want our interaction to just be transactional, right? We don't want to just be like, oh, we're just coming to you because we want you to participate in our research. Even if our research is the overall goal is to help you or is to help someone. They said just like, Tammy, like you mentioned, it's like you said you don't want to just be around when you need something, just like be around. So it was just find opportunities to not necessarily engage, but to just be present, be around, and interact. That way, people are just more aware of our presence and what we're doing. Um, this isn't necessarily related to like the work that we're doing, but for other reasons, I've just been like, I should just do like more volunteering around Fort Collins, just like within organizations that I like to. And um, I think just through that conversation, I like somebody's like, oh, what do you do? And I like talk about what I do. And I think that's kind of like a good step to going to any kind of community engagement. They're like, oh, like Tammy like does this, they do this. So it's kind of like, it's not like you're saying, oh, you're known as like, oh, that's the air quality person, or that's the, like this person, but it's just like having that presence, just like so people know or like aware of what we're doing and like what we represent. So that's really what the speaker was talking about. It's like, well, if you want to interact with, and this person that was talking, I wish I could remember their name, but they're talking about specifically the like Spanish speaking communities around Colorado Springs and like the work that they've done and like activism they've done with those. And this basically saying like, most of the people at the conference were like from health departments and things like that. But it's like, you know, certain people are going to be they're going to be skeptical of like what we're doing. Why are we there? Especially in a health department when you represent a government organization, right? So everyone's like, I don't trust you. You may say you're here to help me, but you're not really helping me, or you think you're helping me, but it actually isn't what I want or what I need. Talking about making those assumptions. So I think it's like you said, just going somewhere, just being present. And it's kind of like, even if we're not part of that community, if that's the best way to say it, but someone just knows who are what we're doing, even if they don't enroll, but it's just kind of like maybe goes a long way with like, oh yeah, like we didn't work with them, but I know them and you can trust them, or they're doing good work. And, this project they're doing actually is like a good thing or whatever. So I think it's like I said, just show up, just be there, like for anything, like for whatever it is. And I think just having a presence goes a long way in what we're trying to achieve, like the overall goal.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I want to make sure we hear from a lot of people. I feel like I could go down that track for quite a long time. So maybe we'll come back to that, or I'll get some people together for a happy hour or something. Um so Paul, Misa, Danny, anyone
I'll
want to
go.
speak up?
I'll go. So, I mean, at some level, I mean, I agree with what everybody has said. But to kind of share my experiences, I do, if we're talking about trying to have what we do be really engaging with communities and not just, hey, we need 30 research participants so we can test your house, and we can do that through the CSU whatever source to get 30, but we actually are trying to have it be with communities impactful and maybe all of that. The trusted partners, I think, has been absolutely key. I mean, I have not recruited directly me to the community residents very many people. It's really been me through those trusted partners. Now, the to me, then the question is, how do you have those partnerships get developed? I mean, it's easy to say you have to have people that the community trusts who are kind of your ambassadors almost to those communities. But when those people are going to those communities to speak for you and say, yes, you people should listen to this person. I know you've had all of these negative experiences in the past of people parachuting in, taking your stuff and flying back out, and you never hear from them again. Listen to this person. They are spending their community political capital on your behalf, which means that they have to trust you. And so that's where that trust, in my experience, has really been so vital, is developing that level of trusted relationship with that person, because they can cut through a lot of potential distrust or mistrust among community members by standing up and saying, listen to this person. This person is here to help you. And it is that here to help you that I think is so vital. we are really good at doing research. Researchers are really good at doing research and trying to figure out what they want to figure out. Where I have found the trust really comes from is when they believe that my goal is to help them, help their communities. Now, I might have other things I'm also trying to do. I might be having things I'm trying to learn, but they don't care about that. The next paper I publish is the next paper they don't give a rat's ass about. Um, they don't care about any of that. But I've talked before in meetings about motivation alignment. I have something I'm trying to do. They have something they're trying to get to, some problems they would love to have a solution for. We don't have to have exactly the same reasons for doing things as long as they align. And as long as they believe that their reason is very important to me. And that is a very big part of it. If they think I'm going to give them lip service, yeah, your thing is fine as long as I get my thing, they're not. I think they've gotten pretty good at seeing through. I think a lot of communities have gotten really good at seeing through that kind of thing. So they really have to believe that a big part of your motivation is whatever else you're trying to learn, you are trying to bring solutions that are going to be durable, that they can use long term. If you do that, then I think the trust level is really high. And even if you don't show up for a year, you're going to be that person who did this thing that was really great, and they'll listen to you again. And so, when I talked about like compensation and wraparound services, certainly I think valuing them as having them believe that they're partners. They're not doing this as a favor to you. This is a partnership where everybody gets a lot out of it that they want, that really helps them. They have to believe that there is enough for them to go. And how do we know what is important to them? This is something that's been mentioned. We don't know what's important to them by guessing and assuming we're right. We partly know what's important to them by having good relationships with these trusted emissaries and listening to them about what we're doing would be valuable to the community, and kind of developing ideas, ideation in partnership. Not, I've got this idea, let's do it, but I'm trying to work through something. How would this look? And do it in partnership with them, I think has been really successful. But all of that is before you actually get into the community. That is really a lot with those trusted ambassadors, the people who will speak up for you. And then once you do that, if you do get in front of the community, it's the same kind of language. It's about what they need, what their challenges are, what they want, what works for them, how it works for them, when it works for them, where it works for them, always for them. And then we have to adapt. If we want it to be serious and trusted, we have to adapt what we're doing to what works for them, not try to bring them over to us. So yeah, and so that's what has, I think, really worked for me in the various activities that I've done that have really been heavily involved with low-income communities, like having the Weatherization Network trust me as a researcher that I'm doing this work to support their program, their network. Having the schools in south suburbs of Chicago believe I'm actually showing up for their kids, things like that.
Thanks. Okay, who else wants to add to the conversation?
Well, I have a couple of things. A lot of what everyone has said is I agree with completely. And Melina, I would say, along with your idea of, that's one of the frustrations that I have. And just to let you know, I work with Katie and Ashley and on a bunch of stuff. So the building of the relationship is going to take time, and we never write that into the grant, or we never invest in a position that can help us do that. And we've got to do that. It's just stupid that we don't. And we also need to figure, I think, kind of like, we've talked about this, and by we, I mean a number of folks, in the area I'm in social science and looking at behavior change and community, engagement and things that, when you build those long-term relationships, listening to what it is they really want, what are their priorities, and then figuring out how to meet those. And I would much rather do research that way than when the grant comes down and it's like, oh, it's in this area. And you're like, okay, I'm going to shift to that area. But then that's not the area where the need is, the need really is. And so one example of that is we had some money from the university some years ago to do some work on some tribal lands. And we were doing it in sexual health. And so we were going to do it in sexually transmitted disease because that was a big concern and there were high rates on the tribal lands and things. And so we did a lot, and we had on our team we had some Indigenous members on our team and everything, and we had good community relationships. However, we also knew that this might not be the biggest problem they have. And it's not. And while it's helpful to them, what they really needed was help with domestic violence. And that's what they told us. And it really feels awful when but the money we had was for sexually transmitted diseases, which is somewhat related, but not the key piece of the puzzle. And so I think that if we can build because a lot of us have interests that are the thing you finally decide you're going to do is part of a bigger constellation of things you could do. And so if we can think broadly about, hey, here's this big pile of things I could do. Now let's build those relationships and truly take the time there to go, here's your list. And we find those, like we find a match there and then we're willing to walk away from things. I think that would be helpful. And us figuring out the infrastructure in part to do that and to sustain it so that these are valued positions in organizations and that we really want to fund these. The other thing I was just going to say was that the times when I've either myself or I've had graduate students who let me start again. Ellison's comment about knowing what you really need is a good one. I would highly recommend that. As far as we have more luck if we can match like who it is with what they're interested in, and and you have that common interest. But when it comes back to giving back to the communities, some things that we have done is so we've partnered with citizen science networks. They're already built, so that's the beauty of those. But when we've used the citizen science networks, we have not put the message out ourselves like, hey, be part of this project. It's been through a trusted person. And so we partner with the citizen science network and the people in their organization who have standing, and then go in that way. But the beauty of those is we did not have to, we had one project where it was like, we were going to then we had the backyard air quality stuff that still, I think to this day makes Christian cringe because of all the brokenness of the piece of equipment. But at first we were going to build our own network, which was like, sure, yeah, no. We partnered with CocoRa's, and then we did give money to CocoRa's for the to help them, because that was our way of saying thank you for helping. And we also did compensate the people. Then another time I had a graduate student who wanted to work with folks who were dealing with different kinds of justice, like procedural justice, and I can't remember the other two kinds. And he was interested in that associated with shooting ranges that are in forested lands and things. And so one of the things that he did was he found an organization that was very interested in that idea. And then he partnered with them and again, used trusted sources. So he put the survey out, but it wasn't him who put it out. It was, he came to a meeting, they introduced him. He got standing from the people who were saying, hey, John's a good guy, this will help us. And then he donated to that organization. And it didn't matter how many people participated in the survey. Even if it's one person, he was going to give this amount. He was he had a full-time job and also was a graduate student, so he had a little bit more cash available that he could do this. But I think that was a really smart way for him to do, define the organization, go to them, they were interested in it, and then he gave back at the organizational level. And that worked well for him. He got and he learned about procedural justice in this realm of where you would put target ranges. So it kind of I think, and like I said, the organization was interested in that. And so he was already showing, I care about the same things you care about. So those are my kind of two big things. But man, if we could really invest long term and have those relationships, I think that's the key. And Melina, I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I hope you can stay on at CSU a really long time.
Thanks, me too.
I can add a little bit. I feel like there have been so many great points that have already been talked about. So for context, my boring day job is in working in decarbonization. So we have a grant from DOE to build a air pollution benefits from decarbonizing industrial facilities. And part of that is we really want to work with communities to figure out, fence line communities to figure out what do they need. And we've been working with a group in Denver for a year and a half now, and we're finally like just getting in to meet with communities and talk to them and get feedback from them. And so that's like ongoing, and it'll really kick off in December of this year, which we're really excited about. And I think, to echo a lot of people's points, finding, like, we're working with Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, kind of a subgroup within them, and now they trust us after a year plus, and they've started to introduce us to some of their environmental justice focused groups. And so that has been really, really beneficial for us. And one interesting thing that's come up in conversation is that this grant is to make a commercializable tool. And so and we're very transparent about that. But there's like a free part of it that we're trying to give them as much information and data as we can, while still having something that we can sell and make money from, because that's why we have this grant. But some communities we've talked to have been very concerned about it being so extractive. And they're like, you're coming in here, we're giving you feedback, and then you're telling us we have to pay for your tool. And so we're working through how are we going to give them value and still kind of meet all of our mandates while giving as much high quality data for free. And so we're having some very interesting discussions, but I think it just boils down to trust and transparency, and kind of making them feel heard, because that's what we really want. Like, the world doesn't need another tool or another widget. Like, we need something that actually works and that is community informed and is informed by different perspectives. So just that little tidbit, that's what we've been doing all this week. So it's really fun that these two things are working in parallel, and we can inform them with each. But yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Anyone else feel like sharing? What should we remember? I think there's been a lot of, I like the way you put it, Melina, the non-negotiables. What do you have non-negotiables in your mind, people who've been quiet, that you have a chance to tell everybody what you must do?
I wasn't quiet, but I'll say the last thing I just put in the long thing in the chat is be genuine. It's non-negotiable. If you want to do this, you have to be genuine. And if you're not genuine,
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Okay, well, I don't think we're done with this conversation. even though we're done with the time. Um, I would value and appreciate being able to continue this. The possibility of having CSU as a group have a culture of how we do things, I think would be really wonderful. For those of us who can't go to every community event, but are willing to pitch in sometime, I'd love to know what that looks like, right? So I have a ton of questions to be better about this and more in community, and I think also, if we can create a culture around it, then it's something that we can pass on to students and have them just internalize what's not negotiable, how you need to do things and how you need to not just give back, but start by being in community and having it be relational instead of transactional. So, I feel particularly bad at this, and I would just love to hear people tell me what to do, and I will listen to you. I will be in touch more about this, and I hope we can keep it going. Thank you for coming, Milena.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just say one more thing before we end?
Please.
Yeah, so I also, yeah, I just want to emphasize what Paul said. Authenticity is really important. The compensation piece is really important, not making assumptions, asking them. I think the other thing that I have learned in this particular position is, as Marilee was saying, we don't think about writing these positions into the grants, but they are very valuable and integral part of doing this type of work and creating those long-term relationships. And so my title is Project and Outreach Coordinator. And at the beginning, when I first got here, I was also doing translation. And I just want to put this out there for those who have not thought about this. Project Coordinator, Outreach Coordinator, Translator, and Interpreter, those are 3 separate jobs. So you can't have one person doing all 3 things. You shouldn't, ideally. So if we think about this ahead of time, we can allocate funds appropriately.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to have a longer conversation with you about that, Milena. And I totally agree that the things you listed are basically a bucket of stuff that we hope that one person can do, but who can find that unicorn or give them enough time? And so how to include those in the grant space as it exists practically, I would love to have a conversation about that.
I'll add one thing really quick, which does go with what you're saying, Melina, and that idea of these longer term relationships. It often seems like the human piece of it, we think much later in the process, that's when we need some people. We should be working on that. It's a 5-year grant, start that at the beginning. I mean, 5 years isn't a long time, but if we can and build that in from the beginning to the cost of the grant and to the time, that I think is also another key piece of this because it values it in the way that it should be valued. And it also values the behavioral and social science piece of this and the all of that we usually don't do well.
I've been writing all of this into my grant reports to EPA, so trying to get them to notice things. But I would love to continue to meet with all of you. There are many people on this call I don't know and interested in speaking with.
Okay. Well, you're definitely welcome at our meetings anytime, but let's make specific meetings, maybe in person, to talk more about this.
That would be great. I would love that.
Okay,
I look forward to learning from all of you. I have so much to learn and I look forward to it.
Same. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. See ya.